Hello, Stat World. Welcome to a Trollala edition. I'm excited to go through some of these problems trollalifically with you. So get that packet ready, because here we go. All right, so the packet that we get before we said goodbye is this guy right here. I want you to turn to 9.1b, and we're going to do that one, and then we'll do 9.2a. All right, so that's what's on the plan for today. All right, so starting it off, for each of the following settings, define the parameter of interest, right? The appropriate null and alternative hypothesis that is described. The mean time it takes for you, all right, so they're telling you right out of the gate, mean time it takes to finish a paper pencil maze is 30 seconds. You want to see if vigorous exercise will make it change. Yeah, all right, so all we say is, does it change? We don't say greater than, we don't say less than, just is there some sort of change going on? All right, so we've got mu, right, because we're talking about means. This is going to be the true mean time to complete maze. All right, so the null hypothesis, the is going to be that mu is 30 seconds, right? That's the go-to time that it usually takes. And we're going to make some people exercise, and then we're going to find some evidence. So here comes your alternative. We're going to look for some evidence that our mu has changed from 30. All right. Okay, so then part B. Lumber companies dry freshly cut wood in kilns before selling it. As a result, the drying process in a certain percentage of boards checked will crack. All right, so let me try and find our numbers here. Here we go, 16%. So we're dealing with proportions. Make sure you're using P now. So this would be the true proportion of cracks in boards. I don't have a whole lot of room. If I had a lot of space, I'd be more specific, right? The true proportion of cracks in the dried oak boards, right? But we're a little tight for space. All right. So the claim, right? The null hypothesis, what usually happens is that they get 16% cracks. Crack is whack. The alternative, let's see, the drying supervisor at the lumber company wants to test a new method to determine if fewer boards. Okay, so this time we're looking for evidence that fewer than 16 will crack. All right, cool. On to number 2. Consider the lumber problem in question 1b. Suppose the drying supervisor uses the new method on an SRS of boards to find that the sample proportion is now 11%. Ooh, interesting. There's a p-value of 0.027 on this. Ooh, that p is low. We know what to do when the p is low, right, class? So we're going to interpret the p-value in the context of the problem. All right, so let's see. Assuming the null hypothesis is true, right? And that's the claim that 16% of the boards are correct. There is a probability of 0.027. So there's the p-value. And if you like things as percent, you can write it as a percent. So there's a probability of 2.7%. Okay, so assuming the null hypothesis is true, right? 16% of the boards get cracks. There's a probability of 2.7% that, what am I trying to say? This is embarrassing. Assuming the null hypothesis is true, 16%, then there's a probability of 2.7% of getting our sample of 0.11. There we go. I think this wig is a little bit tight. All right. So again, p-value. This is assuming the null hypothesis is true. If it's true that 16% of the boards get cracks in them, then there's a 2.7% chance of getting this new sample that we just ran or that they gave us. All right. So it's highly unlikely for us to be getting this 0.11, right? It's highly unlikely that we're getting this 11% sample. So since it's unlikely, 2.7% chance, we have significance. We beat the odds. What conclusion could you draw at alpha 0.5? And then we'll do it again, alpha 0.1. All right, well, if alpha is 0.5, you want to compare p-value to your alpha level. So if we've got a p-value of 0.027, which they gave us up here, that is indeed less than an alpha level of 0.5. So if the P is low, reject the ho. All right, we have evidence that there is a change in the percent of cracks in the boards. If you're changing your alpha level to 0.1, right? If you're changing it to 0.1, so 0.027 is your p-value, comparing it to 0.1, that is not low. 0.027 is not lower than 0.1. So at an alpha level 0.1, we would fail to reject ho. Right, we don't have enough evidence at the moment at that significance level to say that the process has helped or changed. All right. Okay, so what conclusion could we draw? So over here, your sentence would be, we have sufficient evidence at alpha equals 0.05 to conclude the proportion of checked boards having cracks is less than 16%. All right, so that's going back up here. We're saying, hey, we have evidence it's not 16% anymore. For alpha 0.1, the sentence would almost be the same. The only thing that would change is this word right here. We would say insufficient. Otherwise, everything would read the same. So why would you want to have two different alpha levels, right? Why not make it alpha 0.5 so that you can claim that you have some evidence? If you remember from a couple days ago, we've got these errors that happen when you draw conclusions. If you are looking at type 1 error, that's directly tied to your alpha level. So if you want to reduce your type 1 error chances, then you want to reduce your alpha level. So people might want to go here so that they are sure that they're not making a mistake. Whereas here, there's a 5% chance you're wrong. Here, there's a 1% chance. All right, so that's why you have that wiggle room with the alpha. It's up to you or the company or whoever you're working for to decide how much wiggle room you want to have. All right, on to the next one, number 3. Here we go, so some errors. When I do type 1, type 2 errors, I like to do my little cheat sheet up here. It's called the Hoff chart. All right, when it comes to our significance test, there's 2 things that we can do. We can either find evidence, woohoo, and reject the null hypothesis, or we don't have the evidence and we fail to reject the null hypothesis because we never accept the null hypothesis. All right, so if the null hypothesis is true and we reject it, oops, we did a type 1 error. If the null hypothesis is false and we rejected it, good job. You got rid of something that was a lie. You rejected the lie, woohoo. If the null hypothesis is true and we don't get rid of it, that's good. If the null hypothesis is false, it's a lie, and we fail to reject that lie, that's considered a type 2 error. All right, so here we go. This is talking about a construction company needing gravel. Oh, wow. So it takes 500 truckloads of gravel to complete this road. You plan to measure the volume in SRS of 25, right? It'd be really hard to watch all 500 trucks and to count the gravel in all of them. Come on, that takes forever. So an SRS of 25 is what they're going to do. Each truckload is supposed to have 20 cubic meters of gravel, so you test the hypothesis that there's 20 there, or the alternative is that they're cheating you on their gravel. Ooh, how rude. So the alternative is they're not giving enough gravel in their truckloads. So describe a type 1 error in context. All right, so type 1 error. It's true. The trucks are giving us 20 cubic meters. But what do? We reject that. And we say, hey, you're not giving us enough gravel. But they are. So we're falsely accusing them of not giving us enough gravel. Falsely accuse company of not providing enough gravel. All right? The null hypothesis is true and we reject it and we go with the alternative when we shouldn't have. Oopsie, my bad. Describe a type 2 error. All right, type 2. The null hypothesis, it's a lie. But we fail to reject it, meaning we don't catch the lie. They get away with a lie. So the null hypothesis is false. They're not giving us 20 cubic meters of gravel. But we don't catch it. We think they're giving us enough gravel. And at the end of the road making, we're not going to have enough gravel. And that's not good. So type 2 error in this context, company is not providing enough gravel, but we don't catch it. I'll say them, we don't catch them, right? So which is worse? Which is a more serious problem for the city? Falsely accusing somebody? All right, so let's think about what happens. If you falsely accuse them, they're gonna say, okay, I'm sorry, we'll just throw more gravel in there, right? So at the end of the road, you're gonna have leftover gravel. All right, go put the gravel, I don't know, at the playground. Type 2 error. If we don't catch it, and we get towards the end of the road, we're not gonna have enough gravel. The road doesn't get finished, we've got delays. I feel like a more serious problem for the city would be type 2. All right, so I'm gonna say type 2. If city doesn't get enough gravel, the road cannot be finished. That's going to look bad for your leaders. They might lose their election then, right? Who knows? Okay. D, you have determined that the power of this test is 0.38. Explain what this means in context. All right, if you go back a couple of days to your notes, power is right here. So what they just told us is the power is 0.38. So there's a 38% chance that we correctly rejected the false null hypothesis. Okay, so explain what this means in context. Perfect. 38% chance we correctly rejected the null hypothesis, which was mu equals 20, and concluded the alternative. All right, so there's a 38% chance that we caught them in a lie. Describe 2 ways you can increase the power of the test. Whoa, I want more power. All right, there's 2 ways. Again, it's all in those notes. Way number 1, stats, diet, trademark, sample more. Sample more, right? The more you sample, the skinnier you get, the more reliable and consistent things will be. So sample more. That's one way to increase your power. The other way is to increase the alpha level. All right, so instead of doing a 5% cut score, you could change it to a 10%, right? 0.10, and that will increase your power. All right. I don't usually recommend that because if you increase your power, now you've created a higher chance of a type 1 error. But then again, we did say that type 2 was worse. So maybe that's okay. Yeah, so increase it up to a 10% chance of a type 1 error, which is okay because we're trying to avoid this type 2 error. All right, let me scribble that out so you don't get confused when I have the answer key later. All right, tra-la-la-la-la to the next page. Here we go. 11% of products produced by an industrial process over the past several months have failed to conform to specifications. The company modifies the process in an attempt to reduce the rate of non-conformities. In a random sample of 300 items from a trial run, the modified process produces 16 non-conforming items. Do these results provide convincing evidence the modification is effective? Support your conclusion with a test of significance. Well, I will. All right, so the first thing we got to do is define what we're after, right? We've got our magnifying glass. We're going to get a p-value. We're looking at, I think, proportions, right? Yeah, 16 out of 300. So this is a p. So we're investigating the true proportion of non-conforming items. All right. Okay, so it says up here the claim is 11%. All right, so our null hypothesis would be, all right, we usually expect 11% to be non-conforming. Do these results provide convincing evidence that it's been effective? So if it's effective, then it would be less than that, right? Let me read it one more time to make sure. 11% of the products produced by an industrial process over the past several months have failed to conform to specifications. We want to modify it to reduce, oh, there it is, reduce the rate. So we're looking for evidence that we can reduce that rate to something smaller than 11%. They don't tell us what significance level to use, so the go-to is just going to be a cut score of 0.5. All right, so that's what we'll compare our p-value to in the end of things. So the next thing you got to do are your gatekeepers. Zoom it out. Let me squeeze it over here. So you've got conditions. All right, so condition number 1, random. Random was totally stated, right? They said a random sample of 300. So random stated. The next one, ring, ring. La, 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 la. It's Jake from Staff Farm here to do your discount double check for normal conditions. Awesome. So NP, remember we're using the po, whatever we have in the null hypothesis, greater than or equal to 10, and n times 1 minus po. All right, so we had a sample of 300 items, so 300 goes in there. 300, 1 minus 0.11 goes in there. All right, let me grab that T.I. Joseph. T.I. Joseph, what do you say, buddy? 300 times 0.11, 33. And over on that one, you get 267. So we are good to go, right? We are approximately normally distributed. Third thing is independence. Alrighty, I don't know how many items they make here, and it doesn't say we replace those items after we sampled it. So we do have to assume at least 10 times n. So if our sample was 300, 10 times 300 is 3,000. So assume at least 3,000 items in population. All right, so those are our gatekeepers. Block those out of our way. Lovely. So now it's time to do our formula. We need to figure out where we are, right? So our formula, we're going to figure out what our z-score is. Where are we on this Billy Bell curve? All right, so now we finally use the sample. Notice we haven't used the sample at all. Let's see. They had 16 out of 300. So 16 out of 300. We want to see how far away that is from the claim, 11%. And then we have to adjust it for stats diet. 11, 1 minus 11, all over 300. Okay, your calculator is going to finish the rest once you show the substitution. So grab that calculator, head on over to Step World, and we're looking for a test. We're doing proportions, a 1 proportion z-test. Boom. All right, so our null hypothesis was 0.11. Our sample was 16 out of 300. We're looking for evidence that things are better, right? That we reduce that rate. So less than, make sure the symbols match, and then calculate. All right, so we have a z-score of negative 3.1. Ooh, look at that p-value, y'all. It's scientific notation, so that's 0.00085. Woo, that p is low. All right, so let's write it down, shall we? We've got a z-score of negative 3.14. Ooh, pi. And then we'll sketch it out. Whee! Zero's in the middle. And then 1, 2, 3. My baby don't mess around. All right. We are at a z-score of negative 3.14, so we're way out here. So that p-value is the area under the curve. So the area under the curve, according to GTI Joe, is 0, 0, 0, then the 853.86699. All right. So the p-value here is essentially 0. I'm just going to say 0. When you have scientific notation like that, it's 0. Am I right? Mm-hmm. Okay. But if that freaks you out and you're like, no, I don't want to write a 0, it's weird. Fine. 0, 0, 8, 5, and some change. Highly unlikely. All right. So is that p-value low? Why, yes, it is. When you compare that to our cut score of 0.05 that we declared at the beginning of this problem, we see that our p-value is much lower. So we will have evidence here to reject the null hypothesis. All right, your sentence. We have sufficient evidence at alpha equals 0.05 to conclude. Let me pause it there. So we've got the evidence. Our p-value is low. You want to always make your conclusions in terms of the alternative. So we've got evidence that it has reduced, right? That the rate has reduced from 11%. So we have sufficient evidence that alpha equals 0.05 to conclude the rate of non-conformity has reduced. Nice. I love these problems. They're fun. Takes up a lot of space though, huh? All right, so let's venture on over to number 2, shall we? We shall. The germination rate of seeds is defined as the proportion of seeds that, when properly planted and watered, sprout and grow. A certain variety of grass seed usually has a germination rate of 0.8. And a company wants to see if spraying the seeds with a chemical that is known to change germination rates in other species will change the germination rate of this grass species. So they spray 400 seeds with the chemical, and 307 of the seeds germinate. This produces a 95% confidence interval for the proportion of seeds that germinate to, looks like 72.6% up to 80.9%. Wow. All right. Suppose the company conducted a test where the null hypothesis is that things stayed the same, right? That the rate stayed 80% against the alternative that, oh, things have changed. Either this chemical made it better or could have made it worse. And they're using an alpha level 0.05. Use the confidence interval to determine whether the test would reject or fail to reject the null hypothesis. Oh, this is great. So what we're going to do here now is we're going to take this net and we're going to tie it into our magnifying glasses. All right, so it's taking both topics and putting it in one. It's easier than you think. Okay, so the truth is somewhere on this interval, right? The truth is somewhere in this interval. So the question is the null hypothesis captured in this interval? Yeah, 80% is captured on this interval. Well, since 80% could be a potential value, we can't get rid of it. We can't reject it. We can't kick it to the curb, right? Because it is a possibility. So we would fail to reject the null hypothesis. So because 0.8, right, that's the null hypothesis, is on the interval, and the interval is 0.726 to 0.809. All right, so because 0.8 is on the interval, we would fail to reject the null hypothesis. All right, that's all they want. Awesome. Part B, find the p-value for the test described in part A. You do not need to present a complete significance test. So meaning we don't have to make it all formal. That's nice. We can just use our calculator. Then we'll explain what the p-value measures in context of the problem. All right, got it. So if you head on over to TI Joe, right? Head on over to step one. Tra-la-la-la-la. We're looking for a test doing proportions. That's number 5. All right, so now I need to go back here and get some information. The claim is 80%. Now I need the sample. They sprayed 400 seeds and 307 of them germinated. So 307 out of 400 seeds. The alternative hypothesis that we're using is does not equal to, and then we calculate. Check it out. Your p-value here is 0.10. Notice that p is not low. That's why we did not reject the hull. All right, so p-value was, let's see what that was, 10. Explain what this means in context of the problem. So assuming that the null hypothesis is true, assuming HO P equals 0.80 is true, the probability of this sample, right, and that sample P hat was 307 out of 400. So the probability of this sample occurring is 10%. So there's a 10% chance of this sample. Is that rare? Nah, it's not highly likely, but it's not like significant. We didn't beat the odds with this one. That's why we did not reject the hoe, right? We failed to reject the hoe. Got it? I hope it's starting to make a little bit more sense. Tomorrow, we'll just keep on practicing. We've technically learned it all. All right, so look forward to a week of practicing and tra-la-laing.